Hello and welcome to the Ahead of the Game podcast. I'm your host, James Oxford, and today I've got Alex West and Chris Byler with me to discuss which NBA team we think could best fit each of the prospects we are looking at come this year's draft. Is this conversation early? Probably, but that's why we are ahead of the game here. I'm not going to lie, I've grown more and more fond of Harper's game since I talked to Gribanoff on here a couple weeks ago. Just kind of the versatility he threw out the idea of he can be kind of more of a forward possibly, and that kind of clicked me. I was like, dude, he really does have that strength. Now he needs to build out that strength. I think the core strength for him is something that needs to be built on. You can kind of see when he posts up, sometimes he has trouble dislodging the defender, and this is much smaller defenders than he's going to be facing when he gets to the NBA, obviously, especially if he's playing as a forward. But I really like Dylan Harper's game, and what I'm hoping to see at Rutgers with him is can he play off the ball and still be a positive player? Because that's going to be super, super important in terms of projecting what kind of roles he could play at the next level. So what I'm really looking for with Harper is offensive versatility. Is the shot there? And does the bully ball still work at the college level?
That I think that's really the big thing is like when you watch tape. This is not a player comp, and I don't want you to think it is, but like I get a little SGA ish where he's very methodical. He uses his strength. You talked about the core strength, and you're absolutely right. But I think one place where he is really strong is using his shoulders to create separation because he's so lengthy. And I still think I still think the lefty thing bothers people. Like I know at high level basketball, it shouldn't. You should know a guy's left-handed, but I think the way he gets into his shooting mechanics is he uses his length really well to create space. And so there's a little bit of like interesting herky jerky sort of game with him. I don't know about the forward thing. That's new to me, and that's an interesting thought. I don't really love how he runs the offenses that we've seen. I feel like he's getting his shot and then also is a passer, and like sort of as a thought, like a afterthought in what he's trying to achieve. Is like, okay, well, if I don't get my shot, like it kind of made me think of the year of RJ Barrett, where it was like RJ Barrett could do a lot of things when he had the ball, and then he was kind of an afterthought passer. It was like, oh, well, if I have to get out of this situation, this is what I do, as opposed to being a creator. But um, I am really, really excited about the shooting. I think that there's some really exciting stuff there, and his ability to use length and strength. I think he's functionally a lot stronger and a lot more adept at like absorbing contact and doing things that are going to be necessary at an NBA level. That is really something that I'm excited about when it comes to what he can do. And then like I said, I think there are some questions. He's probably not a high level NBA athlete. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be out here saying he's blowing you up on the charts with the measurables and all this kind of stuff. So I think the big question, and James, you brought this point like really well, is okay, now what? What does he do when he's off the ball? Can he do something? Can he end up in a situation where there's already a primary creator? Because if that's the case, the avenues to being a successful NBA player just completely open up for him. But if he's a guy who can only play on the ball, which thus far is what it has looked like, not necessarily meaning that's where it's going to stay, but that has been what it's looked like in the tape that we've seen of him. That definitely closes off like some avenues to, if you get stuck on team A or team B, like can you be that secondary creator, or can you be that kind of Brandon Miller second side action guy? So yeah, I think that's a really great question.
Yeah, with Harper, I think I'm a little low on him right now. So when I was preparing for this exercise, for each of these guys, I have a little notation next to their name in my notes where I have like my predicted range. And I did that so we could pick teams, like realistic teams. For Harper, I had him up to two. I'd be surprised if he goes one, but I had the low end on him, like end of the lottery. And I think that's because I'm worried about what is the thing that he's doing that is actually elite. And I'm not sure there is something, because I agree with Alex that I don't think he's going to be some phenomenal athlete at the NBA level. I don't even know that he's going to be strong for college, but I don't even know that he's going to be a great athlete at college this upcoming season. And we haven't seen the off-ball thing. He only shot 43s in his high school season last year. I think the shooting comes along, so I'm not super worried about that because the numbers aren't bad. But I'm worried that he's not an elite passer. I don't know if he's going to be able to run his own offense at the NBA level. I'm worried about the off-ball thing. I think he's strong. I don't know that he gets to the rim all that easily due to the lack of speed. So if you're not like a great rim pressure guy, and you're not a really great shooter, and you're a good, not great passer, and the athleticism isn't maybe there to be like an elite defender. I don't love the defense so far, by the way. I'm worried that he's kind of a jack of all trades and not all that great at any one thing at the NBA level. And so that's my concern right this second. I'm not freaked about it, but I'm getting like Evan Turner vibes a little bit. And the power forward thing is interesting. I'm not sure that I see that yet because I don't know who the NBA comp is for that. I'm not maybe entirely for the player itself because I don't love comps, but I don't know who's this small and does that in the NBA without like elite athleticism. Like Ahmed is the obvious guy, but Ahmed's a super freak. And so I'm curious to see what that looks like maybe as we move along.
I think there's one. Sorry, James, I had to cut you off here, but I think there's one comp, and it's a little bit older. That if you saw this as I was thinking this through, is like Sean Livingston, the late career Sean Livingston thing, where it's like, oh, he's a secondary facilitator. He's a guy who keeps the ball moving. He does a little bit of everything. I think you could start to see that. I mean, that's an interesting idea of where he could end up. But like you said, like it's not an archetype that's out there in a lot of places. But he's certainly got talent that could open it up if he can clean up a couple of things, especially on the defensive side. He's got to be able to guard bigger than he is, which in high school, who knows?
Yeah, defensively, certainly, I think is a concern. I think if the defense pans out, it becomes clear that it was just him playing in high school, so he didn't really try. And when he gets to Rutgers, he becomes a good defender. If that happens, I think a high level outcome for him could be something like a Alonzo Ball if the shooting is there. Again, that's the high upside of jack of all trades, right? Evan Turner's the low of jack of all trades. I think Lonzo Ball wasn't quick enough to get to the rim, didn't have that burst that you need to get to the rim consistently as a point guard. But as a secondary distributor, he's invaluable. There's no kind of, I think, limit you could put on in terms of what he can bring with the defense included. So the defense is super important. I 100% agree on that. If it's not there and you're a jack of all trades, like you're a jack of all trades on offense and you're not an outstanding defender, then it's a really tough sell. So yeah, I agree with you there. 100%.
I like the Lonzo pick. That's kind of more interesting to me because Lonzo now I think Harper is a very good passer. I really do. I think he's a better passer than maybe I just let on. And so I want to clarify that. But I don't think he's a Lonzo passer, but I agree with you. I think that's a good shout. And for defense, something that's so important is functional strength. And Harper has that in spades. So it's very possible that he comes in and we're talking about him like he's Stephon Castle in a couple months on just maybe not from an instincts perspective, but from a physical perspective and maybe as kind of that kind of mold moving forward. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and throw out my team. Or actually, no, Alex, I'll let you go first. That way I'm stealing teams.
Somebody's going to steal it. I want to go first. I never get to go first.
There you go.
I think the team that's most interesting to me for Harper to end up on is Toronto. And I think that's a team where this now – I got to say, you guys have changed my perspective a little bit in this conversation that maybe there's a second avenue. This was when I was looking at him as a lead ball handler. I think Toronto's got some pieces they are really interested in figuring out what they do. They've got their guy in Scotty Barnes, but then they've got like Grady Dick, and then they've got RJ Barrett that they're trying out. I think Quickly's definitely a high level rotation player. What he ends up being is interesting, but what they don't really have is a guy who can take a little bit of that ball handling pressure off. They've got RJ Barrett, but that presents its own problem. I think putting him in here is something where, he's got other guys he can bounce off of. He can play those secondary roles. He can come out and be a second side creator, and he can showcase his catch and shoot ability a little bit. And so I really like Toronto as a place for him to end up. And who really knows what they're going to end up trying to do? They've got some trade pieces that they may try to move off midseason, like Bruce Brown. So they might rise in the rankings as we get closer to the lottery.
Toronto is super interesting to me because him next to Scotty, like that's two kind of almost jumbo. I know he's not jumbo like Scotty, but if you're thinking of him as if putting him in the point guard slot, that's some size and heft to your ball handlers, which could certainly create some problems for some teams that maybe are counting on some slider, still good defenders, but slider builds. Suddenly they're like, man, where are good defenders going if they're not guarding those guys, and who is guarding those guys? So that's an interesting point. I don't hate it, I think it's an interesting fit. I was thinking more secondary ball handler. So the team I was going ahead with, and maybe I'm 2 players too late here, but the Hornets. I think that kind of they have already some size, some ball handlers, some other guys that kind of are maybe jack of all trades types. LaMelo needs to obviously improve defensively. So if Harper's not a good defensive player, then this may just be a disastrous pick by me. but counting on Harper being at least a passable defender, if not better than that, just because I do think the IQ, the strength is there. Obviously, his dad was held his own. We'll say his dad held his own for sure. I'm not too worried about the defense. So the Hornets is the team I was going for. I think putting him in an up-tempo system where he may not be the most athletic person out there, but he's a good enough passer to find those athletes in transition. And then he also leaks out a lot. I'll say that. Harper leaked out a lot when I was just looking at the FIBA film even. He was leaking out quite a bit in that, which is interesting because you're like, well, some games he could afford to leak out because they're up 30, it didn't matter. And some games they were actually in competitive games there. So his defense did matter in those clips.
I think the Charlotte thing is interesting because it introduces this question, and you guys hit on this, right? Is like, what position does he play? Like Brandon Miller, I think one of the things we saw from Brandon Miller last year was the ability to, in spurts, be an offensive leader, a guy who initiates, who does some things. I think for Charlotte, that's going to be one of the big questions this year is how do they integrate LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller together? And then now you want to throw one more guy in the mix with Harper, who, that's going to be, I think that would be a very fun basketball fit. And I think it does have like a lot of big question marks, but I certainly would not be averse to drafting Harper despite having 2 guys who handle the ball a lot, because that if there's one thing we've learned over the past few years in the NBA is you can't have too many ball handlers and you can't have too many guys who can initiate offense. So who knows, that could work, especially if he looks like Stephon Castle in terms of defensive physicality starts to present itself as we get further in the season.
Yeah, I'll say you can't have too many ball handlers as long as they don't all think they're the primary ball handler. That's a super important caveat to that.
Yeah.
Which, to me, if Dylan Harper went to go play with Ace Bailey, I think he's already ready to say, hey, at least for some possessions, I don't need to have the ball in my hands, because Ace Bailey committed first. So it's not like Harper didn't know what he was getting into when he committed to Rutgers. So to me, there's already that sense of, okay, he's willing to at least play off ball somewhat, I would assume.
Yeah, I like the Charlotte fit. That's really interesting. That's a lot of passing from your primary 3 guys. I think that's a lot of passing IQ, and like you guys mentioned, you can never have enough of that. So, definitely agreed. I think so. I actually went with the Nets here, which maybe is a little contradictory to my position on what he is at this moment. I think it's because I want to see him shoot to try to be the primary guy still. I'm not ready to foreclose on. I'm not expecting him to be that guy. I think that's probably not going to work. I think the secondary plan of action is probably what's going to end up working for him. Trying to be that Lonzo Ball, trying to be that off ball or secondary creator. But I'd like to see him get a shot. And I think the Nets, you just stay close to home. But they have some solid vets right now. They've got Cam Johnson, DFS. They've got Cam Thomas and Nick Claxton, the young guys who Cam Thomas certainly takes the scoring load off you a bit. And Nick Claxton kind of by himself is almost like a passable defense. they've got these young guys like Zaire Williams, and then Day'Ron Sharp had a good year last year. The one thing they're missing is a primary ball handler in Steps Harper. He's going to have all the attempts in the world, all the opportunity to try to be that primary guy. The team's going to stink anyways, so next year maybe they're drafting at the top, or the following year maybe they're drafting at the top regardless. And so if it doesn't work out, then he can move back into that secondary role, and he will have had a whole season of experience working on trying to be a primary guy. And I think that that is really helpful moving forward. But it's a bit of a blank slate. It's not. It's kind of more in the fashion of the Blazers from last year. You know, we talked about the Wizards starting from scratch on draft day. I don't think the Nets are starting from scratch so much because they do have like some really good role players or some good role players on this team already that would fit around a young creator, kind of a la the Blazers from this last draft. But it's certainly a BPA slot for the Nets, and they can just take whoever is, whoever they think can be the next star. And I'd like to see Harper at least shoot for it before maybe inevitably he resigns himself to being a secondary kind of guy. I think that 1 year of development with more on-ball creation opportunity could be good for him.